The voice said, "Turn over, your veins keep collapsing." I look at this anesthesiologist and I can see that he's overly concerned. "Turn over on your side," he says, again. And I do so, and by doing so, I see doctors and nurses running around in medical protocol. And I look back into the room in a corner below the clock, a little bit past 11 o'clock that night. And I began to see a rotating tunnel, small tunnel. And I remember at this moment, he says, "This is going to hurt." And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blackness. All I see is blackness. There's nothing but sound that is soundless. Nothing moves. I hear nothing. And then all of a sudden there is this white light, a sound wave, if you will, that goes from west to east. This flat line of light, white, goes from east to west, beating slightly, almost like a low hum noise, buzz noise. And then within seconds, this white light expands. And as I'm engulfed in this white light, what I see is me, Peter Anthony, looking down at Peter Anthony on the operating table, and I'm immediately going into the tunnel. And what happens at this moment in time is I'm greeted by people that I know, teachers and friends, neighbors, co-workers. I experience this sense of joy, this sense of welcome, and immediately this sense of peace as I go in towards this tunnel. There is no question, there is no doubt. And as I enter this tunnel, it's this handshake, this kind feeling of "you're welcome, come." And as I'm meeting and greeting all these people that I recognize, at the next tier of this tunnel, I began to see people from my past lives. And people say, "Why do you know it's your past lives?" Because I look at these people and I recognize them from previous lifetimes. At this moment of identity, I'm seeing me, Peter, by the name of Robert Longmire. And beside me is my wife and my 2 children, who I loved dearly, who I cared for, I adored. And I see this woman that I recognize, and it's like we're flashing back, and she's at the piano and she's playing a lullaby for a child, my baby that's in the crib. In this joyous moment that I'm feeling towards my children and towards my wife is quickly interrupted by a vision of their death. They died of consumption. And I'm seeing myself, Robert Longmire. This name, Robert Longmire, is embedded in my consciousness, and this sadness and this depression takes over. And I see this child in a crib. I hear this lullaby. That's the thing that's so shocking. I hear this lullaby. And even sometimes when I hear this hush-hush lullaby on the radio station, it brings me back to that moment in my life. I'm quickly fast-forwarded to my next lifetime. My name is Clarence. I'm a black slave. The other slaves on the plantation have nicknamed me Moses. And the why they call me Moses is because I am the touchstone. I am the giver of hope. And I'm quickly flashed to slaves running away, slaves being persecuted. All these people that I knew on the plantation, one by one, being taken away from me. And I feel that sorrow, that abandonment of family. I'm quickly taken to me as a small girl in the Wasatch Mountains, spoiled little brat, precocious, not paying attention to my parents. And I am angry with them because they say something to me that I don't agree with. And so I decide to teach my parents a lesson. And as these parents who are so gentle and so kind are trying to guide me to be a good little girl, I decide to run away from home, and not realizing that I'm running away into a snowstorm, and I freeze to death. And then I'm taken to my next lifetime. And again, I'm watching this from third sense of person, watching this unfold before my eyes. But then there is this sense of fear, this sense of of angst that takes over me. And all I hear is this buzz noise, this sounding of this buzz near my ears. And I don't see me at all. But what I do see is my hair dropping to the floor, to cement floor. And I see my bare feet, shaking. And I look up and I look into a corner, and there I see my mother with other women, all without clothes on, shaking and screaming, horrified by what they're seeing. And my mother is begging for this man who's cutting my hair with clippers to let me go to her. And he slaps me, and they go in and lead my mother in another direction with these other women, and they take me down into the gas chambers at Dachau. The fear, pain you witness on the other side of this experience never leaves you. And I go to my death in Dachau. The next most important past life. I'm a young teenager, an orphan. I'm working at a gas station. I don't know what period of time it is, but the owners that I work for are greedy. They never fix anything. Everything is always broken, and they leave me there by myself. And of course, there's a rush of people coming to get gas in the cars, and the registers don't work. And I'm beside myself because I can't keep up with the pace. And then I look around and I recognize these two people in this particular current lifetime where I am. And I realize throughout my career, over and over and over, every boss that I've had has mistreated me, has not been kind, has worked me like a workhorse. And I began to realize that this chain, this spiritual thread, this spiritual DNA thread must be cut. And so when I did come back into my new lifetimes, one of the things I worked on towards releasing this and understanding it was, the first thing I gathered was I had to go through abandonment issues with my family, leaving my family behind as a spoiled child, leaving or dealing with the abandonment of those slaves that left me, that were so dear to my heart, watching them one by one either be murdered, be sold off, or just disappear. I didn't know where they went. They just disappeared. And this abandonment issue of being a father with two children and a wife that suffered from consumption and died, and then going back to this boss situation, I began to realize at one point in my life, in my career, that the best boss would be that of me. And I say to so many people who ask, who send me emails, why do you think past lives are so important? Because for me, what lesson I did learn was I had to release this abandonment issue. And what was so profound about this experience was that in this lifetime, at the age of 18, I lost my family. My sister was my best friend. And once again, this whole abandonment cord, the spiritual thread, was once again reintroduced to me. And I had to learn how to suffer through all this. And then the goodness of what happened to me when I did recover was I immediately began to reach out to people who became my new friends. There was this cutting of the way, the cutting of the old, the releasing of what no longer served purpose in my life. Because after my near-death experience, there were so many people that abandoned me because they didn't believe, they didn't care, and obviously the information at that time in my life really just didn't make sense. So over and over and over, I say this message for those of you who doubt previous lifetimes. It's not that I'm trying to change your way of thinking about previous lifetimes. They may mean nothing to you, but for me, I recognize something that needed to be worked on in this lifetime. And once I understood that, and once I cut those ties, I was able to move forward. I take pause at this because it means something to me. And as I'm saying goodbye to these past lives, I'm being introduced to dogs and cats, horses. I'm seeing all these animals from the other side, like my past lives. What I am seeing is my first cat named Squeaky. What I am seeing is my first dog named Tippy. What I'm seeing is a rabbit that I named Say. I would say, Say, come here, and the rabbit would come to me. The same thing over and over and over again would appear to me, and I rescued a raccoon that I found on the road. And I could see these animals in my tunnel speaking to me as though they understood my language, as though I understood their language. And what I began to realize during this, this circle, this spinning, rotating circle, that our animals do come back to us. We are connected to those animals from our previous lifetimes. We are connected to these animals in this lifetime. That is why it is such a sorrowful experience to lose the dog that you love. That's why it's so heart-wrenching to lose the cat or the horse that you trained or the horse that you rescued. Over and over and over, I began to realize that the animal kingdom is something that I learned the most valuable lesson called unconditional love. We talk about, the animal kingdom, and we forget about these animals that are amongst the earth. We've gotten into a way of, on my telephone, my resume, my money, my education, my relationship, and we kind of look at the animals as backdrops in our life. But what I learned more than anything, that these animals taught humans the most profound lesson on this earth called unconditional love. And we don't get that at times. We don't see that. We don't learn that lesson. And I go back to something as I'm going in towards the collective conscious, what I refer to as the Akashic records. All throughout the Bible, the Torah, the Exodus, Isaiah, Genesis, everything phrases back to, on the fourth day, God created the animal kingdom. And what I learned about this as I'm spinning towards this, what I call the Akashic records, as I'm spinning towards the collective intelligence, that everything is composed of energy and matter. The horses, the dogs, the cats, the trees, the rocks, everything that has been given the breath of life that is on this planet has been given to us as a part of our movie, as a part of our co-star, as a part of our day player, as a part of our extras. All these things matter in our life review, in our own personal near-death experience, because there is nothing greater than, there is nothing less than, there is all equal in the eyes of the divine, of the ascended masters. And as I'm spinning towards this collective intelligence, I think what I've spoken about so oftentimes are these numbers, are these sound frequencies, are these mathematical symbols conjoined with color, conjoined with sound. I could hear in the background these melodic voices speaking to me, singing to me, almost like trance music. And I've experienced past lives, dogs, cats, but what I'm absorbing, what I'm understanding, what I'm digesting is that as I have an aha moment, as I'm downloading information, I'm realizing that these symbols, these colors, these codes, these notes that I'm hearing, these melodic female voices, these melodic male voices, were almost as ancient as the Merkaba, almost as ancient as the Arabic tunes, the violins that would play, the flutes, the Native American flutes, the Tibetan chimes, the bells that would ring all throughout this collective intelligence. And as once I got something, once it resonated within my soul, these numbers would expand in color, these voices would expand in tone, these mathematical symbols would vibrate to colors green and blue. Every time I got a collective thought and it made sense to me, and I acknowledged it and I downloaded it and I accepted it, these numbers, these mathematical symbols, these voices would expand. Imagine jumping into a kaleidoscope and all these colors, all these new colors you've never seen, were spinning all around you as you're downloading and understanding the importance of collective intelligence. Imagine the mind of Darwin. Imagine the mind of Einstein and Tesla. Imagine the mind of Chero, Da Vinci, all these greats before us, and then imagine everything that you've read. Imagine every movie that you've watched. Imagine every play that you sat in an auditorium and listened to and watched with such joy. All that is being downloaded into your consciousness, and you are not denying, you're accepting. And the word I use over and over and over again is you are allowing this information to be a part of your soul energy. When I was on the other side, The collective intelligence that was playing before me was the mind of Einstein, the mind of Gerald, the mind of all the great prophets. And as I'm literally reading the Bible, page turn, page turn, page turn, page turn, I can see my finger reading every passage, just using my hand as a guide, reading every passage all the way on the Bible. Next, as from 0 to 60, I was watching that and learning it, and it made sense to me, not in the way that we were taught, but in the perfect teachings of the Christman, in the perfect teachings of Moses, in the perfect teachings of Isaiah. And that these teachings of the Bible, and the teachings of the Torah, and the teachings of the Native American Indians, every teaching on this planet is amazing. It is us who edit, who slice away, who take away. But you have to ask yourself, when the Native American Indian is hiking up the mountain, and when the Jew is hiking up the mountain, and when the Christian is hiking up the mountain, when the atheist is hiking up the mountain, even the agnostic is hiking up the mountain, when we all get there, we're at the top of this pinnacle, and we look out to the vista ahead of us. What do you see? Majestic. Every person that walked up that mountain, his journey, her journey, all mean something to them. It matters because once we all get there, that vista is always magnificent. There's nothing greater than, there's nothing less than. All that you experience is the now. You don't question, you don't doubt, you accept. And as you go into this collective intelligence, you begin to see that the oceans, that Mother Nature, that every tree, that every branch, that every duck that crosses a pond or swims in a pond, or every dog that runs in a park and catches a frisbee is the most important moment in your life. Why? Because you're at peace. Because you are at a moment of surrender. There's nothing more that matters than when you're walking along the ocean and the waves caress your ankles. You're at a place of peace. And what I learned during this collective intelligence is that when I'm in a state of peace, I manifest. And I would learn that lesson when I came back into this particular lifetime, that I would manifest. It's almost as though you ask your magic genie to present to you not the money, not the job, not the relationship, but how may I be of service to the planet? What can I do to bring peace onto this planet? How may I rescue an animal? How may I help the homeless person across the street? How may I compliment someone at the grocery store? All these moments, all these little tiny moments that to us really don't matter because we're so inundated with the news. We are so wrought with fear of where our nations are going. We are constantly tuning in to the news. We're constantly tuning in to relations that serve us not. We're constantly tuning in to bosses that mistreat us. And as I'm watching all this and downloading all this information, and again, the colors, the sound, I began to understand that, yes, this makes sense to me. Over and over, this moment, these colors, these sounds, these mathematical symbols, I began to realize that every person that I encountered along the way were nothing more than day players in my life. Every person I saw in my life review mattered. No less than, no more than, they were the imagine watching the Lord of the Rings, and there's that scene when all the dwarves and all the elves and all the men come together to battle the orcs. But you don't have the extras, you don't have the sound, you don't have the music. All of a sudden this becomes dull. So everything in our life is orchestrated by sound, is orchestrated by a handshake, is orchestrated by a compliment, is orchestrated by us being at a place of peace. All these things are part of where we should be. And I find sometimes that we're not there. I find at times that we are in a moment of drinking too much. We're in a moment of working too much. We're in a moment of spending time with the wrong people who influence, who really should not be a part of our consciousness. But as a spiritual person, what I began to understand, what I began to learn was I vibrated at 250 watts of energy. It was important for me, as I'm watching all this, not to flicker down to 25 watts of energy and to be around people who are doing drugs and drinking and criticizing people who are gossiping, but to ascend to a higher vibration of consciousness so that I could go into a higher place of learning, that I could go into a higher place of education, I could go into a higher voice, I could go into a higher place of understanding. As I progressed into this tunnel, I began to understand that everything that we do is digested on a daily basis. So imagine you're in a career that is not leading you anywhere, or you're in a relationship that is failing and you're arguing back and forth. You're not in a place of peace, you're in a place of worry or anxiety, and yet you don't leave, you stay. And what I began to realize in this collective intelligence, these Akashic records, if you will, if you want to call it that, was that when we go to sleep at nighttime, and again, I'm watching this, looking down at Mother Earth, and I'm seeing the entire globe at nighttime sleeping, and I can see these fragments of gold coming off during sleep times. And I began to understand between the hours of 1:11, 2:22 a.m., 3:33 a.m., 4:44 a.m., and 5:55 a.m. that we are in a REM cycle, a 90-minute cycle, over and over and over again, and we are releasing whatever has taken place in our day. We are releasing the negative encounters. We are releasing the person that made fun of us. We are releasing the boss who doesn't serve us. We're watching someone abuse an animal on the street. We're seeing the homeless person who is struggling. We're releasing all these fragments of thought that collect in like pollution. And according to one state of consciousness, by what we eat, by what we put into our body, by what we watch, by those people that we surround ourselves with, all those things are playing out every night, night after night after night after night after night. Collective intelligence is the time to cleanse. Collective intelligence is the time to release. Collective intelligence is the time to receive, to understand. But we don't do that. We wake up, and I remember waking up years ago when I came back and I recovered in a work relationship where I was not being served, where I just stayed over and over for what? The money. I wasn't at peace. I was in the state of I needed the money to survive. So I was in a lack of consciousness. And when I did return, this was a theme that I had to understand. This was a theme that I needed to digest. This also is a theme I needed to plan out. Yes, there was money. Yes, there were checks. Yes, there was security. Yes, there was all these earthly things. But I tapped into, and I still tap into, going back to the collective intelligence, when I go into the place of peace, when I trust the divine, when I saw on the other side, when I surrender, when I allow, then I manifest. And all of a sudden, these people, these places, these situations present themselves to me. Over and over and over again, I kept encountering these moments in life, these serendipitous moments that were meant just for me. Just for me. So as I am accessing this collective intelligence and all this data that's being downloaded into my consciousness every night, I begin to understand that my turmoil, my depression, my lack of consciousness was my choice. I had to take responsibility for my choice. What I learned on the other side, there are no victims. Everything that we do is navigated by our choice. So if we stay in a negative relationship, that is our choice. If we stay at a job that is not serving us, that is our choice. If we are being selfish with money and we see someone on the street and that person that really needs our money and we don't do it, that is our choice. But understand that these choices beget an action, and the action begets a reaction. Over and over and over and over again, these actions and reactions were part of our collective intelligence cleansing at nighttime during the 111, the 222, the 333, the 444, and the 555 a.m. So imagine, as I said, you're seeing this and understanding this, that all these things that we're doing or not doing or should be doing or could be doing, and we accept this and we allow this as information from a higher perspective, no judgment, from a higher perspective, going, you know what? You're right. This makes sense to me. And as you digest this part of how I contribute to the shift of consciousness by one small action, by giving money to the homeless person, by giving a compliment to the lady that works at a grocery store. Those moments, when you feel inside that moment of thank you for allowing me the joy of giving you this compliment. So as I said, as these began to make sense and these colors are vibrating at such a I can't even begin to explain the colors that I was experiencing. I go into the life review, which I've talked about so extensively, but I remember at that moment when I'm being guided to a place called Bordeaux, where there's this release of judgment, where there's this release of greed consciousness, where it's this release of not wanting to get involved. I looked at all this information that I received during this tunnel, during these past lives, during these people called Robert Longmire and Clarence, through the pets that I had adopted. And I began to realize that everything, as I said, matters. Everything is connected. Everything that you do today, again, is a part of your movie, of your book, of your chapter. The challenges that I faced when I returned back into the real world were rather simple, but at the same time complex. I remember coming back and I was so anxious to talk about what I experienced on the other side, but I was talking to people whose ears didn't get it. I remember the nurses and the doctors would look at me with such, I wouldn't call it disdain, and I wouldn't call it, crazy, but I could feel them kind of taking pity on me as, oh, just poor dear boy, what is he thinking? And I could feel that. And as I began to understand that these people that weren't understanding what I experienced, and it really didn't matter. What mattered was my truth. What mattered what I saw. What mattered what I experienced on the other side. I began to understand that what I saw on the other side, that there was recovery, that there wasn't a speech impediment, that there wasn't a lack in my life, but to get out and to be a part of the spiritual community. And so I remember there's this thing called the doctors, the opinions, the medical experts who would come in. And every time a doctor would come in and talk to me, there was always bad news. And at the same time, I was, in that seesaw of listening to the experts, but also going back to what happened to me on the other side. What I saw, again, me traveling the world. What I saw was me helping. What I saw was me rescuing animals. But according to the doctors at the time, number one, they gave me 3 months to live because they refused another surgery. Number two, they wanted radiation. They wanted me to do chemo if the radiation didn't work. And all the medication they were giving me weren't working. In fact, I remember the doctor coming in and said, Mr. Anthony, I am so sorry to see what you're going through, but the reactions you're having to all this medication shouldn't be happening. The prednisones, the morphine, all these things that were given to me created blindness. There were days when I could see, and there were days all I saw was that white light. All I saw was that white light. One day the doctor came in and he could see that I was distraught. I could feel it. And I couldn't feel my feet. I couldn't feel my ankles. I couldn't feel my thighs. I couldn't feel my hips. And he came in with that face of hopelessness, that face of, the person who's the messenger who has to relay the bad news. And I remember he said, Mr. Anthony, and then before he could even get out his sentence, I said, I can't feel my legs. I can't feel my feet. I can't feel my thighs. I said, tell me, why, what's going on here? And I said, just please tell me that I'm not going to lose movement in my legs. And said, please tell me that I'm going to be able to walk. There was that face of doubt, that face of messenger who relays the message that no one wants to hear. Well, Mr. Anthony, unfortunately, we can't explain why these drugs we've given you are creating crippling arthritis. It shouldn't be doing this. Typically what happens when you're on these medications, if you continue these medications, it has long-term effects, so it should not be happening now. So unfortunately, I must say that You may not be able to walk. We can't figure this out, but we will do something with this. We promised to find out what's going on. So I remember I will cut to in a hallway doing lab work. And this is the day I can't see. This is the day when this white light is surrounding me, but I can hear. I can hear. And the person next to me, I have no idea what expression I had on my face. I'm sure there was doubt. I'm sure there was depression. I'm sure there was so many emotions that were going on, that were taking place on my facial expression. But he said to me, "Don't give up." And I went back to my room after all these tests in the lab, blood work. And I remember the nurses came in and said, "Mr. Anthony, we're going to move you to the 3rd floor. Hope you don't mind." And so they did. And unbeknownst to me, I was moved to the 3rd floor, and my window overlooked a track. And every day at noon, I would see doctors and nurses and some patients running the track. But I remember looking down, and there was this patient struggling in a walker with a physical therapist, and he would fall down and get up, and I would see just from my window this moment that this person, this patient, would get up, and he'd get back to his walker, and the therapist would help him out, and he'd fall down again. Up, down, fall down, up, down, walk, inching to wherever he was going, constantly. The next day, doing lab work, trying to figure out what's going on with all the medications. And there's that voice again, "Don't give up." So the moments of being in a hospital, again, having no family in this lifetime, and by this time all the friends had deserted me. But you know what? This voice, "Don't give up. Don't give up." Over and over and over, I'd hear that voice. And every day around noon, it's as though this was some kind of miraculous moment in my life. The blurred vision would disappear. This white light would disappear. And there I had this view of this man once again on the track. Same plight, same struggle, same frustration. Get up, fall. Get up, fall. And I would hear that voice, "Don't give up." So I remember after months of being in the hospital and the slow recovery that took place, the foods I had that they were putting in my system weren't helping, the medications weren't helping. And then something very profound took place in my life. At the foot of my bed, at nighttime, I remember the nurse coming in, checking my IV. You could hear her. And then all of a sudden that white light appeared at the foot of my bed. And all of a sudden I could see, blurred, but I could see a Native American Indian at the foot of my bed. And he was talking to me about thistle. He was talking to me about aloe vera juice. He was talking to me about garlic. He was talking to me about faith. He was talking to me about ancient remedies to put into my system. And I listened. And over and over and over, this Native American Indian would come to me at night. And every night, the nurse would leave my room. And I would awaken and wait for that white light to disappear and see at the foot of the bed this Native American Indian, giving me my blood count, giving me my how to wean off the medications. And I didn't understand what this was at the time, but I listened and I accepted. And again, going back to, when you're at the state of consciousness and you're weak and you're by yourself in a place called recovery, and there aren't any people there to help you, to encourage you. You do what every good spiritual person does. You go within. I remember when I left the hospital and I told the doctor the day before, I will walk out of this hospital. And he looked at me, this kind of quirky smile, but more or less a half smile, as he looked at me, and I could see doubt in his eyes. And I remember the day that I left. I remember a dear friend came, and I remember I grabbed on his shoulders. And I remember walking out that hospital room, looking around at all the experiences that took place in my life. The Native American Indian that appeared to me, the voice that said, "Don't give up." And as my best friend Harry is taking me down the hallway, who do I see but the man who struggled on the track? Get up, fall down, get up, fall down, get up, fall down. And I remember passing him, and as though everything went in slow motion. And I turned to him as I cradled my best friend's shoulders, and I said to him, "Don't give up. Don't give up." We walked to the elevator. I looked around, and in slow motion, he looked back at me and smiled. He got it. And why I bring this up at such a pivotal time in this lesson I share with you today is because I go back to something that took place the night of my fatal accident, that fatal moment in my life, that moment of death sentence. One minute I'm blowing out candles, and the next minute I'm dying. But as I'm waiting to go into the OR, and the pain that I'm feeling as I'm bleeding all over my clothes, and the blood is on the gurney, and it's falling down onto the floor, and the nurse who had rescued and found me was arguing with the doctors to take me, to put me in next, that I imported to help me out. And I remember as I'm laying on this gurney, there was this African-American woman, frail, ageless, with these piercing blue eyes that looked at me. And she reached for my hand and she said to me, "Don't be afraid to go into the white light." And I remember looking at her with such awe. This moment of peace that took over my physical body, the pain momentarily disappeared. And as Nurse Sullivan comes out and brings the doctors and the nurses to bring me into the OR, I look, and this woman that said to me, "Don't be afraid to go into the white light," was gone. Just vanished, disappeared. And why I bring this up? Because after recovery, I began to understand that this woman was just the beginning of the encounter with the enlightened beings. These enlightened beings, advanced conscious beings that came to me, were part of my new world. And as I began to accept this, what would happen in my life is that these beings would show up. I remember one time I was at a car wash and I was listening to Maureen McKinnon. I had the music blaring loud. It was just in a moment of enjoying detailing my car. And this homeless person comes up to me. And I remember everything kind of went into a pause mode. And he came up to me. He didn't ask for money. He asked how my day was going. He asked what music I was listening to. And he asked me why. And I told him. I said, "I just listen to this music because it brings me such peace." And he just looked at me and walked away. But as he walked away, this pause mode, this blue light, this white light that I saw on the other side was all around him. He was kind of surrounded in this white light. And I didn't at the time think it was an encounter. I didn't think at the time it was a light being. Over and over, this happened to me. I refer to these as exit points. There was a time when, I was drowning. And I remember the voice saying to me, "Flow with the current." And as I flowed with the current, I was set free to shore. And there was this young woman, piercing blue eyes. "Wow, you made it." And she walked away. But one of the most critical moments of these advanced beings, these enlightened beings, took place when I was doing grid work. Every year on my birthday, from 11/11 to 11/29, 11/29 equals 11/11, I go all around the planet, to Sedona, to Maui, to Stonehenge, to Canterbury, to Mount Shasta, to Mount Soledad, wherever. Go to these power grids on the planet and offer myself as a vehicle on this planet to be used. How may I be of service to the planet? And as I make this pilgrimage up a place called Bell Rock, and one thing you learn as a hiker, when you hike up, whatever path you take is the same path you take down. But I forgot that. And it's 5 o'clock, it's closing hour, and I'm at the top of Bell Rock. And as I was sitting at the top of Bell Rock, I looked down, I could see the park ranger said, whistling at me, motioning, "Come down." I see the two friends I'm with motioning, "Come down." And he's pointing at his watch. And I remember, okay, And I got out of sorts, and I remember, okay, well, I saw this small little cliff, and I thought, well, I can jump over that, and I can land on the other side, no problem. So I made a quick, swift jump, not realizing there was sand beneath my shoes, my tennis shoes, and I slipped. And as I am plummeting to my death, I remember looking down at pause mode, and I could see the park ranger, and I could see my two friends, their faces of fear, of shock. And as I'm plummeting to my death, my knapsack falls over my face. And I can't see it. I'm struggling with my knapsack, and I flip it back. And at the moment I flip it back, my knapsack catches onto a branch. And as I'm dangling on this branch, looking at the park ranger and looking at my two friends, it's as though they knew he's going to die. I knew at this moment, this is it. This is my moment to check out. But then something took place. This hand reached down, grabbed me. This young boy, girl, androgynous spirit, 16, 17, I don't know, teenager, but I couldn't tell. But those piercing blue eyes. Are you okay? She said. Yeah. I said, I'm okay, thank you. And he walked away. And I'm watching this angel, guide, real person, you identify it any way you choose. But I remember everything went into that slow pause mode as he walked into the dusty pathway down the mountain, disappeared once again. And as I began to study these things, as I'm studying numerology and as I'm working with clients free of charge at the time, just studying and learning about the codes, then I began to study about a thing called exit points. Exit points are close calls with death. Or I also learned at a time of divorce, when you're at your wit's end with the relationship that you're in, you just have no hope. You're depressed. Perhaps the relationship that you're in is someone who is abusive to you, and you have to find something within you that breaks you free from this abusive relationship. That is an exit point. And as I began to study these exit points, something much higher, something much more divine would always take place in your life to get you away from those circumstances called exiting your life. So I bring this up because there's something that is far more magnificent than we can even begin to understand. These numbers that I studied are chords. We all have our HD frequency. I didn't all understand it at the time, but when I would listen to this trance music, when I listened to Amanda and Buren, when I listened to Lorraine McKinnon, when I listened to Enigma, there's always these certain tones, always these certain chords, these C, high C's or the C notes, the E minor would hit. And as I would hear these notes in my headphones, I would immediately go into a higher place of consciousness. I'd go into a higher place of thinking. I would go into a higher place of solutions. I would go into a higher place of purpose. So every day when I get up, and even though I cannot run, the doctor was right, I'd never run again, but I am walking. And I get on my bike ride, and I go to what we call the dry riverbed here in Palm Springs. And we've had a lot of rain lately, so the rain from the waterfalls comes down and the Palm Springs River just flows. And as I sit there looking down at this river and I'm hearing the brook, I'm watching the hummingbird before me, the hummingbird float before me. I'm seeing the white egret soar above me. I'm also seeing the hawk. I'm seeing the San Jacinto Mountains covered with snow. I go back to that moment. Mr. Anthony, you may never see again. You may never walk again. I'm so sorry. We're doing everything in our power to help you. Please be patient. Well, I was patient. And every day that I see the mountains, and every day that I get on my bike and I ride, I'm grateful. And the reason why is because I have purpose. The reason why is because every compliment that I give, I don't give to receive something back from the clerk at the register. I do it because I give it unconditionally. That gift from the animals, that gift that you learn from the dogs who love you no matter what, those dogs and cats that are there to greet you every time you come home. So every day when you see someone on a bike, think of me. I'm riding my bike and I'm smiling at people, waving, And I've been given a nickname. They call me Peter the Meter Reader because I'm always smiling and saying, bless your day. Thank you for listening.